everyone, and welcome to our global audience gathered here today for the second inaugural webinar of Synergy's newly launched permanent M&E Webinar Series. Synergy is a global software company that specializes in monitoring and evaluation. We provide M&E software solutions to governments and nonprofits worldwide. The purpose of our M&E webinar series is to provide a vibrant, intellectually stimulating virtual space where M&E leaders, practitioners, technologists can come together to share their knowledge, their insights, their experience, and perhaps most importantly, to learn from one another. Whereas our first inaugural webinar focused on the current state of monitoring and evaluation in government organizations and nonprofit organizations, this one today is perhaps more forward-looking, and where our distinguished panelists will discuss key trends and new innovations that are shaping or will shape the future of how organizations, particularly international development organizations and governments, how they do monitoring and evaluation in the future. We will also explore the new and emerging challenges that will face government nonprofits as a result of the emerging trends and technologies that our panelists will talk about. So with those opening remarks, I'd like to, in fact, say that we have a truly global participation today. We had over 1,500 registrations. I see that currently we have almost 300 participants on the line, and more will join us as we begin. And registrations from over 150 countries. So a truly global event. No pressure, panelists. You're just facing a truly global audience today. So with that, I would like to turn the floor to our distinguished guests, panelists, and what I would like you to do is introduce yourselves, your organization, and briefly tell us your story, your professional journey of becoming M&E specialists. So I'd like to start with Christina Wallan, please.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Emily and the team, for inviting me. I'm very honored to be among you today. And yes, as you said, my name is Christina Wallan, and I joined the development sector about almost a decade ago. It was not my intention at all to join the development field. As a business student focused on finance and economics, but I found my way into it early on as an intern, and then I joined the German Development Cooperation, GIZ, for a couple of years, and then I joined consultancy field for research, mainly evaluation and monitoring methods of development interventions, and now I'm back again with the German Development Cooperation in the function of M&E coordinator and advisor for one of our biggest global projects or programs, as we call it here internally, working in 16 countries, basically in the field of agribusiness and value chain development. So yeah, I think this is a bit of a brief history about how it started and where I am.
Thank you, Christina. Emilia, why don't you tell us your story?
Thanks, Arshak. Sure. I started my M&E journey at Synergy as a project manager and a system analyst of our business intelligence solution for M&E system called Synergy Indicata, which is also strategy execution and monitoring and evaluation software. Through Indicata, we are providing solutions for project portfolio management systems and for grant management systems for government and mainly for non-profit organizations. So in both domains, I think you will agree with me that M&E has its essential part and an importance. So by leading this type of project, you have to establish profound knowledge about M&E and the M&E world. Otherwise, you will never succeed. So by doing that, I was like kind of had to start to learn M&E at that time. I have learned by myself, by doing researches, and of course from our senior staff on this field, from our previous projects, from our lessons learned, and of course a lot from our clients. So seeing how diverse is the M&E world in terms of M&E tools, logical and result framework approaches, theory of change-based evaluation, or data collection and indicator tracking methods, you are realizing that it's never ending. You have to continue to learn in accordance with the current trends, requirements, and the speed, which I'm doing currently, and Synergy is providing me such continuous challenging opportunity thanks to our diverse clients and their high-level requirements. Now I'm leading the M&E domain in Synergy, where together with our M&E field specialized project managers, business analysts, and system analysts, we are playing central role alongside, of course, with our product owners in the development of Synergy Indicata products. And these project managers, as subject matter experts, are not only implementing and delivering M&E softwares, but also providing M&E consultancy to our clients. So I'm everywhere involved in this M&E world. I'm continuing to be there.
Synergy. Great. Thank you, Emilia, for that interesting introduction and personal story. Simon, the floor is yours.
Hi, Arshak, and hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be with you all today, and looking forward to the discussion. A little bit like Christina, I did not think that I was going to be working in M&E. Initially, when I was in college, thought I would be a journalist, and realized that the journalistic profession was going to be a difficult one in which to make a living. So I studied economics. My first job actually was what got me into monitoring and evaluation. I was a fellow with the Overseas Development Institute. And I actually worked in the National Planning Commission of the government of Nigeria. So despite appearances, I am a former Nigerian civil servant, proudly. And that was actually where I met Arshak in Abuja. And through Arshak, I ended up working with Synergy for a couple of years after I returned to the US. And I was essentially sort of a proposal writer and project manager for Synergy, helping to set up M&E systems in various places around the world, some of which I believe are still actually in use, which anyone who has developed software before knows that 5 or 6 years of continuous usage of any system is a testament to the quality of the implementation. And after working for Synergy, I wound up in my current role. I work for the International Rescue Committee, which is a global humanitarian relief organization. And I am the monitoring and evaluation advisor for economic recovery and development programs, and I do spend a lot of my time working on technology and usage of technology for monitoring and evaluation of our projects around the world. So that's me.
Great, thank you, Simon. And I thought that you looked familiar. Thank you for, I'm getting older, so I may forget things, but thank you. Yes, we have met before. Great, and now let's jump right into our core discussion. And before we do, I want to preface by telling our global audience that the views that our panelists will share with us today are their personal views and do not reflect the views of their affiliated organizations. So the first burning question that I have been waiting to ask you, and I'm sure this is of great interest to our audience, is, in your opinion, what are some key trends that are compelling organizations to change the way they perform, the way they carry out monitoring and evaluation? If you want, I can.
Can I start by sharing something?
Of course, Simon, go ahead.
So I was thinking a little bit about this question the other day, and what has changed, and I think it's also important to reflect on what has not changed. So I was watching a documentary on trade in ancient Rome, and they used the example of a cave where archaeologists found some vases that had been used for transporting olive oil by the Romans. And the vases were covered in stamps that the Romans used for administering taxes. And the stamps on each vase spelled out the sale price, the farmer who had produced the olives, the year of production, the type of olive, the quality grading, the date of purchase, which port the vase had been shipped to and from, and the official who had collected the tax duties for that vase. And what struck me about this was that there was not one single computer involved in this process. And yet I think we can all agree this kind of data quality would be the envy of many large organizations here in 2020. And what that made me think, or kind of that reflection, was that we need to keep in mind that the technology is only a tool, right? And the gadgets and big data and all that stuff will only help us to be more effective in our work if we have a clear and logical purpose in mind, as the Romans certainly did in this case. And if we invest the time and effort in the people and the processes that are needed to properly support whatever technology systems it is that we're implementing. And I personally believe if the Romans could do it, back then we can also do it here today. So that's just a little bit of my perspective on the long-term view of technology and monitoring and evaluation. Thanks.
Thanks,
Here I can.
Christina, go ahead.
Yeah, here I also can jump in with seconding this opinion that data quality has been a very strong trend at the moment. I mean, I understand as well we're heading more into collecting evidence, into seeing exactly what's working and what's not, and also giving the argument for it, and seeing the real change on the target group or the people who are getting the intervention. So again, if the Romans are able to do that, I think we should be able to do that as well. The other trend that has been also going on in the last couple of years is the need for flexible data that can be analyzed and interpreted in a way that's understandable for the wider audience. So basically going away a bit from complicated analysis, but going more into having something more understandable for the people. Also having approachable data that you can just go to a company website and click few buttons basically, and seeing what kind of impact they have been reaching in the couple of years, or in a certain sector, or in a certain area. Also being more outcome oriented. So basically back in the days or the previous approaches were more focused on output, so mainly administrative data like the Romans, but now more into what did we really achieve out of this output, and how are we presenting that. So more data focus, more into impact, more into accessibility and flexibility of data, especially with the time of COVID, or I mean, now most of the field work is on hold in most of the countries that were affected. And this requires, of course, other approaches of getting the data that you need for the intervention.
Thank you, Christina. Emilia?
Yes, Ashek, I will list several trends for today's remote workers, globalization, diversity, flexibility, as Christina mentioned, networks, digitalization, AI, and in the same time, simplicity. I think that these emerging trends creating tension for organizational leaders and employees as they go through the waves of changes in their organization, in particular in M&E field. But I would say that it's not only trends that are shaping M&E, but it might even vice versa. Having M&E in place will help to identify the need of these changes and the organizational adaptation. So I think it is kind of closed loop. Trends are shaping M&E, and the M&E is shaping the trends, the changes that need to be overtaken by those organizations. I think each of these trends that I have mentioned have their specific implication on M&E field. I would talk about simplicity because I think that because of the speed, diversity, and the need of continuous change, organizations are aiming to have simple and straightforward result frameworks. Just because of the further maintenance, because the processes are changing very frequently, and they have to be able to maintain that. Imagine if that will be complicated, how they will do that. I used to see giant frameworks with hundreds of non-smart indicators, which are they are not feasible, not only because of the cost perspective, data collection perspective, they are non-useful at all. But nowadays I see that organizations are aiming to simplify by introducing very straightforward, realistic results with their minimum number of indicators. Also, I see from the current trends that subject matter experts or consultants, those who are designing these frameworks, and also the management who are interesting, they are not stressing the importance of the output indicators, such as how many kids were vaccinated, how many people were trained, etc. But it's necessary, of course, to counting what you have implemented, but I think it's not enough. And this emerging trend we see in other organizations as well, that they are stressing now on impact indicators. They are providing higher priority for being able to realistically measure the final result, whether they have achieved their main goal or just achieve by just doing the activity or project implemented there or not.
Thank you, Emilia. A common thread that I heard in all your three remarks was this major shift from a focus on outputs to a focus on, outcomes and impact. So a follow-up question to you is, how has that shift? How is that changing the way you, as M&E specialist practitioners, you do work? What implications does that have on how you carry out your functions within your organizations?
Okay, if I may answer, let me bring an example from the government case. There are a lot of aids for developing countries. A lot of projects are implemented in different sectors, right? And in the end, it can be counted whether these projects are succeeded or not by just counting these output indicators. But whether the country GDP have been increased or not, this is the impact that, as a result of those projects that have been implemented, they have to contribute to the growth of that country. But if after 5 years of their strategic plan, they see that, hey, we have implemented so many projects, but nothing has been changed in the country, then something goes wrong. Either the figures are not correct, someone is cheating, projects are not implemented the way that was planned. So it's easy to find the gap, but in a later stages, I mean, they used to do that maybe later on, but now this was kind of lessons learned for them. And they understood that they have to establish from the beginning those outcome indicators, those impact indicators, like which will help them to measure and to see maybe after the quarter or semester where they are in terms of higher results.
Other panelists, do you want to address my follow-on question?
Sure, Arshak. So this might be just a factor of the kind of work that IRC is involved in and the sort of projects that I'm supporting, but a lot of them are kind of individual client level services. So for example, job skills trainings, entrepreneurship trainings, cash assistance in emergencies, and a variety of other counseling services and so forth. And in that sort of programming, socioeconomic outcomes are often not directly observable, right? You cannot look at somebody and see whether that person has understood how to correctly plant corn, or whether or not they have a job. And so it has really increased the importance for us, specifically of client feedback and survey data. And so a lot of the kind of the technology and the expertise that we're emphasizing and looking for more as we shift from an output oriented kind of universe to outcomes is related to basically gathering and then also interpreting survey data essentially. So that's probably the most significant shift just on an operational level for us based on that change. And then the other one that I guess is really key is that when it comes to outputs, it's not always that big of a deal if different funders of ours have different definitions of what the output is. You can kind of square one with the other. But if they have different definitions of what outcomes are that they want to see and what the indicators are that they want to use to measure those outcomes, it becomes really burdensome to collect that information and really hard to compare across projects or across countries or draw any sort of big picture conclusion, right? You might be able to say something for that individual project, but you can't say anything for your portfolio as a whole. And so we have had to kind of work with our funding organizations to try to encourage them to align and harmonize as much as possible what their actual concept of outcomes and outcome indicators are. So I think to kind of come back to my initial point about how you have to sort of start with the end in mind when it comes to technology, we've had to kind of make sure that we have a clear definition and hopefully is consistent definition of what the actual outcome is of a particular kind of program. So that's all from my side.
You are muted.
Thank you, Simon. Very interesting observations. Christina, do you want to?
I can just add to this trend. Also in our case here, it required from us to have a very sophisticated M&E system, basically to integrate those data from the 16 countries that we have to basically being able to answer any questions that might be related to output or outcome, since anyway we're collecting survey data yearly on a yearly basis. So this confronted us with the basically jungle of data that has been collected in different ways with different variable names, for instance, and not necessarily in the same approach or the same systematic way. This data availability is, it has of course advantages and disadvantages, and when it exists, of course it's very good, but it then requires a different approach to analyze it and make sense out of it, basically, which of course changes the way we're doing M&E now.
Thanks very much, Christina. I'd like to move to the next question, which is also related to the first one, but this one is about emerging innovations that are shaping the practice of monitoring and evaluation. And innovations can be conceptual, methodological, or technological. But in your opinion, what are those key emerging innovations that either you are already exploring, working with, applying in your work?
Should I start? Okay, let me start. So, of course, for me, I'm facing all the time with the technological innovations. First thing that I will mention in this sector is the M&E softs that are shaping the M&E field. And nowadays, because of all this diversity that I have mentioned before, the M&E softs that you are using or you are trying to purchase need to be so dynamic and so agile that will cover and support all these diversities in the M&E world. Like each organization have their adopted M&E manual too. They have their specific log frames and the result framework with different leveling, different hierarchy, even graphs, different level of indicators that are measuring those results. Each organization has their data collection and indicator tracking methods. Theory of change-based evaluation. For example, there are organizations who are not only trying to measure their corporate framework, but also the project and the program level framework. So like trying to have this bottom-up contribution from project to program level, then from program to project level. And this is mean that your M&E software should be that much dynamic and in order to allow to have this aggregation, not only for the quantitative, but also for qualitative data. And I'm proud to say that our Indicata is doing so. The next technological innovation, I think the IoT devices. Those who are not familiar with IoT, the Internet of Things. These are the devices that are embedded with sensors, software, and other technologies for the purpose of connecting and exchanging data with other devices and systems over the internet. Examples are camera surveillance, sensors, GPS tracking, etc. And those devices nowadays are used for the data collection purposes, for automated data collection purposes. Then maybe third technological innovation that I will highlight will be the AI, artificial intelligence, for doing this regression analyzing, adapting and learning, then based on that recommending the next actions to be taken for achieving the planned results. This is for technological innovation. For the conceptual innovations, I would say it is nowadays the realization of the importance and the need of the M&E culture in their organizations. We have talked about this a lot during our previous webinar as well, and this made me to think about it again. And I have, in my mind, I have kind of broken down it to the following for the M&E transformation on those organizations who do not have that M&E culture. I have broken down them into three main, I would say, points. First is surface level capabilities. I mean, the skills and the knowledge. If your employees have it, it's good. If you have those subject matter experts who can start and set up the M&E world in your organization, then it's good. If not, then you have to hire. The next step, I would say, the deep level capabilities such as mindset and the people's resistance for the changes. So management, for resolving this, I think management should start find solutions and ways to have this smooth transition by involving employees, by gaining their ownership or making clear that the M&E is not just for rebuke or for punishment, but it's for better way of work, for finding gaps or for making programs as effective as possible. So you need to make it clear for your organization, for the employees, why M&E is necessary. And then the third step or point, I will highlight the tangible artifacts that teams can produce, such as visual representation of systems or introducing of these M&E tool systems or semi-annual reports, briefing notes, something that will visualize and demonstrate the results maybe during all staff meetings, or in some webs, in your website, like your people and employees will see all the time where you are, where are the issues that you need to fix and work. And the last one was the methodological innovations, right? For this, I think there are organizations who are trying to move from program level to the corporate level. As you know, for each program or for each project, M&E budget is very few compared with other costs. So for arranging that kind of budget for the implementation of M&E, the priority is very low. But because of this, if the corporate organization has several programs, they are trying to introduce per program small, cost-effective M&E solutions. I think on short term, it's okay, but for the long-term perspective, it has its indirect cost savings and benefits if the organization will introduce the corporate level M&E solution. Having corporate level M&E will not serve them for only digitizing or automating their processes, but I think it will also harmonize their processes across the programs and all the countries. So I think some of organizations figure out that already, that in long-term perspective, it is costly to introduce corporate level systems, but some are still struggling and using per program frameworks with very low level budget. But I already see that trend that organizations are trying to have introduced these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Emilia. Christina, Simon, emerging innovations that you are seeing?
So I can add to this. Basically, I mean, Emilia had mentioned many points, and for us in the M&E function, we're always looking for exactly quick solutions with the data that we need, so that we do not address with data that we do not really need and incur so much cost that the project does not have. So on the data collection level, since we're working in rural development, we're working mainly with the smallholder farmers. So we're always looking into what kind of emerging innovation that we can use to collect accurate data, especially when it comes to harvest and productivity. And on the same time, that can be done quickly without bothering the respondents and taking, I don't know how many hours of his day, and doing that on sometimes on a season basis. This, of course, had made us think, okay, what are the other ways that with which we can collect the data and having the accurate data that we might need. So remote sensing is also a trend that we're trying to get into it more and anchor it in our projects. Previously, we had participatory approaches, especially when we worked with youth programs. So they're always on their phone, and we thought when they have intervention anyway with us online, then maybe our monitoring data should come from that. So the target group or the intervened people, they were basically giving us the monitoring data that we needed on output and outcome level, which was very cool, and it worked well in the sector, basically. There were also other experiences. For instance, in Egypt, there were something called harassment map, which fits very well in the topic. It's a very sensitive topic, for instance, and having the right platform for women and girls to directly report what happened and find the solution for it, or find the support that they need. It helped also in solving or picking up on the innovation trends in the sector. But this, again, it has to be anchored in the intervention itself, being part of it. Because sometimes, as Emilia said or mentioned, the M&E culture is sometimes not always present, or is cornered in a certain area. That's only to provide accountability, but it's not only that. And the new innovation or trends, they have been proven that they could be part of the intervention, they could contribute to the implementation itself, and of course serve the purpose of monitoring that the project would need. Open sources software, they have been contributing a lot in our M&E work. For instance, having a system that's built basically with cheap sources and not needing to worry about hosting a server with X amount of dollars has been also helping, and I think it's a very cool trend that has been going on. Smart interventions, basically, and when you plan the intervention, basically to make sure, okay, how can I collect the data maybe automatically? And this is often basically in infrastructure projects or projects where they require constant observation. This is my intake on that.
Thank you, Christina. Let's jump to our third question. I want to say also that we're getting many wonderful, really interesting questions from our global audience. A lot of the questions generated from your insights that you're sharing with us. But before we move to our questions from our audience, the third question that I've been meaning to ask you has to do with what we would call, information overload or the data deluge, because at least in my view, and I may be wrong, doing more rigorous, more systematic, more outcomes oriented M&E necessarily means collecting more data, collecting, processing, managing, analyzing, making sense of, and then putting to use that data. So my question to you is, how are you as individual practitioners, and how are the organizations that you're affiliated with and work in, how are you tackling the big information overload challenge? And let me start by asking Simon to respond, because I think he has very deeply held views on this, perhaps.
Yeah, I think probably everyone on this call knows what you mean when you're talking about the information overload. I think, you know, whether it's the number of Zoom calls that people are on from one day to the next, or just the amount of data that's being collected, or your email inbox or whatever, information overload is a ubiquitous challenge, right, nowadays. Specifically for monitoring and evaluation, we have this challenge quite often, where we'll collect you know, let's say 300 data points for a particular monitoring and evaluation activity, and only end up actually using and analyzing 20 or 30 of those. And this creates frustration amongst the people who are providing that information, and also the ones who are collecting it. So I think, you know, it's a similar theme. I think there are some innovations that are helping us with this, in particular, affordable and user-friendly business intelligence software is something that makes this a lot easier to manage and get some like basic insights out of data without being you know, a statistician like myself. But really, it comes down to the same challenge that I mentioned at the start of the call, which is having a clear reason and rationale for what you're going to do with the information that you're gathering. And the way that we kind of try to do that at IRC is by having data analysis plans be part of the terms of reference for a data collection activity. So rather than going out and collecting the data and then figuring out later what you're going to do with it, start with the end in mind. And the second thing that we're in the process of institutionalizing across the organization at the moment are quarterly data review meetings as part of the project management cycle. And so ensuring that you know, every couple of months there is a space for the project team and the staff to step back, you know, from the fray of report writing and data collection and quality checks and all of that, and actually look at what learning they can draw from the information that has been gathered. Yeah, and so I think it's a combination of technological changes in terms of having good mobile data collection systems, like Christina mentioned earlier, and having corporate M&E systems like Amelia was talking about. But really, it's the processes and building the capacity of your staff to actually ask questions about data. That's a really big cultural shift. A lot of M&E practitioners are used to just reporting, description. The graph says that 50% of people met the target. So, you know, we met the target. And they don't, they haven't been really encouraged to ask whether that result of the 50% of the indicator being met makes any sense or tells us anything meaningful about the project. So that's like, we refer to it at IRC as data literacy. building data literacy, I think, is another really key component. Thanks, Arshak.
Thanks, Simon. Christina, Emilia, do you want to tackle the question about tackling the data deluge?
I can jump in for a sec.
Sure.
So, as Emilia mentioned, also something very interesting about artificial intelligence and how the sector could really benefit from that. I think, in general, M&E and development sector is a bit behind. We call them late adopters in general. Even though the artificial intelligence is picking up for years now in different sectors. I mean, when people hear it in the sector, they get kind of scared. What is that? And we don't understand it, but every one of us is using it. I mean, when we have Alexa at home or Siri, this is part of artificial intelligence. When you have in your Google account the filter of emails and spams, and this is also artificial intelligence that you have been using day to day. And I see no problem in implementing that in our sector, and not only serving the M&E purposes of analyzing a huge set of data, but also customizing that to our target group where we're intervening, and exactly knowing, when you have your own Amazon account or the other one, I don't remember what's called, and they give you suggestions what kind of movies or series that would be suitable for your previous choice. Why we don't have something similar in our sector, basically taking up the effort and the time in designing the right intervention and collecting the right data for it to reflect on what our intervention is reaching. Of course, this has, I'm not a big, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for one thing over the other. It has also the aspect that we need to take care of, the privacy of the respondents, that we have to take care of, basically making sure that data is not being used for other purposes. This is also a very important aspect of this trend. I mean, at the moment, the new data protection regulation, I don't know about other countries, but in the European countries, it's a very important thing. Also for us, M&E, we need to take care of that. We have to inform our respondents and our organization, basically, why are we collecting data, how are you using it, and where we're basically saving it. So it has downside, but a big advantage that needs to be explored more. And I think till now, and our sector is a bit behind, and there is way more room to explore this.
Can I say something to that last point about the digital identity stuff and data protection? I think this is one area where IRC, at least as an organization, is somewhat resistant to adopting new technologies, particularly biometrics. We've had a lot of pressure from our funding organizations to use biometrics, particularly for beneficiary identification during cash distributions. And we work with a lot of at-risk populations and people who are undocumented in the country that they're residing in. So, those could be either refugee groups or marginalized populations where, they are understandably very nervous about the government of their country actually having their biometric information and being able to identify them as a member of that particular subpopulation. So that is one area where I think, our feeling is that, sometimes the best way to protect clients' privacy and data is not to collect it. You know, but that's kind of a strategic decision, specifically related to biometrics. And yeah, there's certainly been a lot of pressure on us from international governmental organizations that I won't name to use biometrics. Up until now, that's not really something that we're engaging in at scale.
Thank you, Simon. Speaking of information overload, I have a Q&A overload right now. Just questions bursting in the chat room, and many timely and interesting questions. So that's why I want to give our global audience, our participants, to hear from them, their voices, their burning questions to you. And I could not skip this one question because it is probably the most timely question given the global context that we live in right now. And the question is from Nart Dojoka, asking, what has changed in the M&E landscape since, I'm sure you can guess, COVID-19? And what trends, changes do you think will remain in the post-pandemic age? I think it's a very wide-ranging, broad, universal question. So any thoughts you'd like to share?
So this is also something that we have been facing here. So we still need also to report on COVID intervention, and we still also need to basically put up with the situation and have our data being solid about what's going on and what kinds of impact COVID have or has on our target group. And this pushed us, of course, to look for other alternatives for data collection, basically to be more flexible and see how we can report on the situation and how can we feed in whatever going on in our region areas and putting that to the data decision-making chain, basically. So this made us think more about mobile data, about more secondary data as well, and other ways to reach our target group, and how we can continue business as usual, of course, with making sure that none of our target group is being put at risk because of contacting other people or enumerators and so on. So this is what I think at trend because of COVID that has been really strengthened. And I think afterwards it's been working in many cases. So I think this might stay as well. Looking also for our local support and local staff and our team in the countries being basically decentralized and everything. This is something very important, building the capacities on national levels, basically to carry on and take over what needs to be done. This is pretty important, and the crisis showed basically that the development sector needs to think more on a local level rather than the international approach sitting in the central office somewhere.
Yeah, so I actually was part of a seminar on cash program implementation in the COVID era. So if anyone on the line is involved in cash programming and would like to have a detailed case study on that specific topic, then Arshak, you can put me in touch with them after the call. But yeah, I mean, in short, as Christina said, our number one priority is the safety of our staff and our clients. And so we had to pretty much bring to a halt in-person data collection for monitoring and evaluation. It's sort of slowly resumed with personal protective equipment and things like that. But we work with, with refugee populations who are living in close quarters with one another, where social distancing is not really practical, and so we have to be sensitive to that. We've moved a lot from in-person data collection to surveys by phone. The challenge with that approach is that it increases the digital divide, right? And so women and children in particular in the communities that we work in often don't have access to any sort of phone at all. And so we end up having a bit of a challenge in terms of ensuring that we're getting a representative perspective when we call people to ask them how the project is going or how they're doing. And I think, in a lot of other respects, however, we were a global organization that was doing a lot of remote collaboration and communication already prior to this, and so to some degree, things have not changed all that much. I think what's really tough is the kind of inability of our teams to meet in country offices and field sites, where a lot of our staff also don't have good internet access in their homes, and so it's a case of our staff being impacted by the same digital divide as our clients. But yeah, as an organization, we set up sort of in the weeks after the pandemic began, a global tracking system for tracking how it was impacting each of our offices and what sort of adaptation measures they were putting in place, what the government policies were in that particular location, and so on. So that I think was really helpful from an organizational planning perspective. But yeah, in terms of our on-the-ground work, it's certainly challenging. But I think has also shown in some cases that the amount of in-person visiting and traveling around that our M&E staff was doing was not entirely necessary. And so it's also revealed that you can get more accurate information by phone than some people maybe would like to believe. So that's over.
If I may add also, I think nowadays these IoT devices again can be very helpful with the sensors, cameras, or smart parking solutions, GPS trackings. They can automatically collect the data without human intervention. For example, indicators like electricity consumption rate or a basic water supply, electricity system outage, quality of the water. For this type of indicators collecting the data, there is no need to implement a manual survey. So this can be automatically collected, this type of data, by embedding these devices, for example, in water and power infrastructures. I think by realizing this, how easy this day, I think the consumption of these IoT devices will raise in the future as well.
Thank you, Emilia. I realize that we are over time, but since we have so many excellent questions and I see people are still here in the webinar, I want to ask a few more questions to make sure we hear from our global audience and they get some answers from you. I want to combine a few related questions having to do with outcomes, measurement, complexity, One question, and feel free to answer in whatever order or which parts of any of the questions. So a question from Nuruddin Alassane about how do you measure outcomes in a complex context with many variables to follow? In other words, how can you measure complexity with technology? Another question from Lynn Exton asking, not all outcomes can be robustly captured with data. How do you square the need for anecdotal evidence with data in a robust M&E program? And another question from Hamdi Hirsi, again, related question. Since outcomes are typically more difficult to monitor and evaluate, since data is often not available and primary data collection is necessary, what tools can support collecting and managing outcome data? So three related questions. Feel free to respond to any of them. Really excellent questions.
I'll start and just be really brief. The first two questions I think are related. Essentially, the way in which we try to contextualize our outcome indicators, which are mostly quantitative, is through analysis and gathering of qualitative data. So when we, do our let's say we do our baseline and our end line survey in this particular instance, and we see that food consumption has increased from baseline to end line. We don't just assume that that is as a result of our project. We take that finding back to our staff, and in some cases, we're trying to do more of this, but take it actually back to the client communities and ask them whether this is consistent with their experience, whether they think that the situation on the ground has actually improved, and gather that qualitative information to give context to the outcome findings. So I know that's not a perfect answer to your question, but that's kind of, in the absence of a perfect solution, what we typically do. And that is also kind of related to the second question. The qualitative data, and especially the capability to analyze and interpret qualitative data, is a key capacity area that we're trying to build in our organization right now. Thanks.
My answer to this will be very short. I think that the outcome shouldn't be that much complicated. If they are, then they should be break down into more smaller pieces, more feasible and easy to measure them. And then just to introduce quantitative, maybe smart indicators and collecting data by simple surveys for measuring those outcomes. That's it.
Christina, would you like to add any thoughts?
Yeah, it's not the direct answer per se, but I would say, because I would say for M&E, you should not be tempted with asking everything. When you have your log frame, look exactly what's related to your intervention, what's the core of your intervention, and what you want to learn about the implementation, so that you can steer your implementation. I mean, there are so many factors that's affecting the intervention, but at the end, I have to be very selective according to the resources that I have and the budget that I assign to the M&E. On the same time, on a way that I have the data that I need. There are so many interesting data out there that might be relevant, but even if I get them, they're not going to really affect the decision making on the project level. So stick with that. Don't be tempted. This is the first message. The second message that I would like to give: not all the indicators are quantitative. There are qualitative data that's very relevant for the implementation and for monitoring. one of the ways that we used to do, especially with harassment interventions and this kind of interventions, that we had basic message SMS services that basically encrypt the sender, and so we don't know who's sending, but they're telling us exactly what they have learned from the intervention, how they're using that, and what they would like to integrate in the intervention. So having this way of communication, this you cannot really capture with a short survey or even a long one, because this is qualitative in nature. This is the feedback that you want to have from the people that you're designing the intervention for. So don't be tempted with always quantitative, but look exactly what kind of data that might be relevant for me and for my intervention, and basically look for ways how I can get this data in the form that it should be like, so that I can use it and integrate it in my decision-making process.
Thank you, Christina. There is one question specifically for you, Emilia, about the use, to explain how artificial intelligence can be used in M&E to help advance the measurement of impact. So go ahead.
Okay, let me bring an example, just two indicators. I'll try to be very short. One, let's say car accident mortality rate, and another one, number of traffic violations and fines. If we have this number of traffic violations and fines through IoT devices or somehow integrated with the police department, and this data is pulled in your system, of course, there always needs to be this M&E automation tools, software. And then you also are capturing this mortality rate due to the car accident. If you have a big data there, of course, AI can do the regression analysis and come up with just a simple, very linear, find linear correlation between these two indicators, and to recommend, for example, in case you will increase the fine for these traffic violations, in that case, you will decrease the mortality rate in your country. This is one of the solutions for this case. This can be just finding this linear correlation. Another example can be AI can suggest scenarios saying, like, if you will keep the same values of your X indicator with the same speed, let's say, then you will achieve for your results by 2025, for example. But in case you wanted to achieve to your results in an earlier stage, then you have to implement the following activities for accelerating your results. I hope I have answered your question.
Great, thank you, Emilia. And because we're way over time, I'm going to ask final question, a very practical, down-to-earth, real-world question from GR Bhatt from Mercy Corps in Nepal. And the question is, how much should you budget for monitoring evaluation? Whether, and this is a question that I get a lot all the time, I think we all do, whether at a project level or at the organizational level, how much should be, and I think a related question I saw in the thread was sort of the trade-off between increasing pressure to do more rigorous monitoring and evaluation to capture outcomes data, and the resource and budgetary constraints facing organizations. You know, how do you square those two conflicting, in fact, pressures? Simon, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a major challenge for us as a nonprofit organization, even though we are a large and well-resourced one relative to many others. We still have very limited funding for technology infrastructure and support. We try to insist on consistently having 3 to 5% of the program cost devoted towards monitoring and evaluation. That's obviously a very kind of vague target, but I think it does help to ensure that we don't have as many projects that have just haven't accounted at all for M&E in their budget, which did happen previously. So that's kind of maybe one simple way, is to try and have a standard budgetary allocation for M&E in your organization. And other than that, it would be using, as Christina mentioned, kind of cheap and open source software to the extent possible. In particular, the Open Data Kit is a really commonly used tool for us. Thanks.
Thank you. Christina?
I wouldn't actually put a percentage or a number to it, because the way I see it, it has many factors that's affecting how much I should spend on monitoring and evaluation. I have to look basically what kind of intervention do I have, and what kind of indicators that I need to report to the funding organization, basically. And the targeted group, how big is this? And basically look into the different scenarios and options at the beginning, before starting the project, basically before starting your M&E system. While you're doing that, you should look, okay, how I should report on this? What are the ways that are possible for me to use to report on my indicators that's competent with the area where I'm implementing? What kind of topic as well? And set a budget for that, and put your arguments for it, why you need this budget, and why other options wouldn't work with your indicator reporting. This is one part. Regarding the rigorous evaluations or impact evaluations, I have also to look in which stage am I in the project. Do I need to plan this from the beginning? Is this a new intervention that I need to collect evidence that's working, and therefore I need impact evaluation, or it already has been implemented several thousands of times and I'm already in upscaling phase that I do not need impact evaluation for at all? So this also affects what kind of budget you need for M&E in a certain intervention.
Thank you very much, Christina. So with that, I'd like to close our webinar. Just some final words. To those participants whose questions we didn't have time to respond, rest assured that we will provide written answers to you in the coming days. So your answers will be addressed, of course. Now, I would like to mention also that we will upload a recording of this webinar on YouTube and our other social media channels. And we will also, so this is a permanent webinar series. So we will have the next one early in the new year. So please stay tuned. Follow us on LinkedIn and our other social media channels to get updates on future webinars in 2021. I would like to thank the more than 150 participants who stayed with us, despite the fact that we went way over time. It reflects the quality of insights and observations that you, our dear panelists, shared with us today. Ultimately, this webinar series is truly meant to be a practical peer-to-peer learning event, a space for unfiltered learning and knowledge sharing. I want to thank you all. And in closing, I want to wish everyone good health and a bright, positive, and healthy 2021. Thank you very much, and see you all soon. Take care.